The dashboard camera flickered to life, capturing the rain-slicked asphalt of Fulton Street in Atlanta, Georgia. Under a sodium orange streetlight, it was 11:47 p.m., and the cruiser's siren wailed briefly before cutting out, replaced by the low hum of the engine. Officer Daniel Hargrove, badge number 472, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing at the taillights of a black Honda Civic. Inside, Aisha Carter gripped the steering wheel, her heart thudding as the red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. She was just 3 blocks from home, her nurse's scrubs still creased from a 12-hour shift at Grady Memorial Hospital. The camera caught her glance at the mirror, her lips tightening, her breath shallow. She wasn't speeding. She hadn't run a light. Yet here she was, being pulled over. Again. Aisha eased the Civic to the curb, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them at 10 and 2 on the wheel. She'd been through this before too many times for a 29-year-old who'd never had so much as a parking ticket. Her brother's voice echoed in her mind. "Keep calm, Aisha. Don't give him a reason." She turned off the engine, rolled down the window, and waited, the rain tapping softly on the roof. The air was thick with the scent of wet pavement and her own rising dread. Officer Hargrove approached, his flashlight cutting through the drizzle, illuminating Aisha's face. He was a stocky man in his late 30s, with a buzz cut and a jaw set like concrete. His partner, Officer Ryan Keller, stayed by the cruiser, watching. The camera on Hargrove's shoulder recorded every move, every word. "License and registration," Hargrove said, his tone flat but edged with something Aisha couldn't quite place. Disdain, maybe. She reached for her purse, moving slowly, deliberately, her eyes flicking to his. "Hands where I can see 'em," he snapped, his voice sharper now. Aisha froze, her fingers hovering over the purse. "I'm just getting my ID, officer," she said, keeping her voice steady, though her pulse raced. She pulled out her driver's license and registration, holding them up. Hargrove took them, shining his flashlight over the documents, then back at her face. "You know why I pulled you over?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "No, sir," Aisha replied, her voice calm but firm. "I was driving the speed limit. I signaled when I turned." Hargrove smirked, a small, almost imperceptible curl of his lip. "Your taillight's out. That's a violation." Aisha's brow furrowed. "My taillight? I just had my car inspected last month. Both lights were fine. Don't argue with me," Hargrove cut in, his voice rising. "Step out of the vehicle." Aisha's stomach dropped. "Officer, I don't understand." "I out." Now, his hand rested on his holster, a subtle but unmistakable threat. The body cam caught the glint of his wedding ring as he gestured toward the door. Aisha's mind raced. She knew the drill: comply, stay calm, survive the encounter. But something in Hargrove's eyes, in the way he stood too close, made her skin crawl. She opened the door and stepped onto the wet pavement, her sneakers squelching. The rain was picking up, soaking her scrubs. A few passersby on the sidewalk slowed, their phones already out, recording. "What's your name?" Hargrove demanded, stepping closer. "Aisha Carter," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "You live around here, Aisha." The way he said her name felt like a jab, familiar in a way that wasn't friendly. "This is a rough neighborhood. You don't look like you belong here." Aisha's jaw tightened. She'd grown up 2 miles from Fulton Street, in a modest house her parents still owned. She'd worked her way through nursing school, clawing her way out of the stereotypes people like Hargrove pinned on her. "I live 3 blocks away," she said, her tone clipped. "I'm a nurse at Grady. Just got off my shift." Hargrove's eyes flicked over her scrubs, then back to her face. "A nurse, huh? You sure about that? We've had reports of drug activity in this area. You got anything in the car I should know about?" Aisha's breath caught. "No, sir. I don't do drugs. I help people who do." His smirk returned, colder this time. "Turn around." Hands on the hood, the command hit her like a slap. "For what?" she asked, her voice rising despite herself. "You haven't told me what I did wrong." "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Hargrove said, stepping closer, his hands still on his holster. "You people always make it harder. You people." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy, like a blade. Aisha's heart pounded. But something snapped inside her. She wasn't going to let that slide. Not tonight. Not after a lifetime of swallowing slurs and suspicion. "You people," she repeated, her voice low, trembling with anger. "What's that supposed to mean?" Hargrave's face hardened. "Turn around, or I'll make you." By now, a small crowd had gathered, their phones still recording. A man's voice called out, "Yo, why you hassling her? She ain't done nothing." Hargrove spun toward the voice, barking, "Back off, or you're next." Aisha stood her ground, her hands still at her sides. "I'm not resisting," she said, loud enough for the cameras to catch. "But I'm not letting you treat me like this for no reason. Tell me what I did." Hargrove grabbed her arm, yanking her toward the car. The body cam jerked as he moved, capturing Aisha's gasp of pain. "You're under arrest for obstruction," he growled, twisting her wrist as he forced her against the hood. The cold metal pressed into her palms, and the rain soaked her hair, plastering it to her face. "Obstruction." Aisha's voice cracked, but she didn't cry. "Not yet. I asked you a question." "That's not a crime." Keller, the second officer, finally approached, his face unreadable. "Dan, ease up," he muttered. But Hargrove ignored him, cuffing Aisha's wrists with a roughness that made her wince. The crowd grew louder, their shouts blending into a chaotic hum. "Let her go. This is bullshit. We're filming this." As Hargrove shoved Aisha toward the cruiser, her phone slipped from her pocket, hitting the pavement. The screen cracked, but the call she'd started to her brother, Jamal, was still active. His voice, faint but frantic, came through. "Aisha? Aisha, what's happening?" The Fulton Street incident, as it came to be known, exploded online within hours. The video's dashcam, body cam, and bystander footage spread across X, racking up millions of views. Hashtags like #JusticeForAisha and #Fulton Street trended for days. Local news picked it up, then national outlets. CNN ran a segment with a split screen of Hargrove's smirk and Aisha's cuffed hands. The taillight, it turned out, wasn't broken. A mechanic's report confirmed it the next day. But by then, Aisha was sitting in a holding cell at the Fulton County Jail, charged with obstruction of justice and resisting arrest. Her brother Jamal, a 32-year-old high school teacher, bailed her out the next morning. When she walked out, her wrists still red from the cuffs. He hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm okay," she whispered, but her eyes were hollow. The weight of the night pressed on her chest, heavier than the cuffs had been. The Carter family wasn't new to this. Their father, Marcus, had been stopped and frisked regularly in the 90s, back when Atlanta's police department was notorious for profiling. Their mother, Denise, had taught Aisha and Jamal how to survive these encounters. Hands visible, voice calm. No sudden moves, but survival wasn't enough anymore. Aisha wanted justice. She hired a lawyer, Vanessa Brooks, a fierce black woman with a reputation for taking on police misconduct cases. Vanessa's office was a cramped space downtown, cluttered with case files and framed photos of her own family. She watched the videos with Aisha, her jaw tight. "This is textbook," she said, pausing the footage on Hargrove's "You people" comment. "We're not just fighting a charge, we're fighting a system." The case moved quickly, fueled by public outrage. Protests sprang up outside the Atlanta Police Department, with signs reading "No Justice, No Peace, and End Racial Profiling." Aisha became a reluctant symbol, her face plastered on flyers and news chirons. She hated the cameras, the interviews, the strangers who called her a hero or a troublemaker. All she'd wanted was to get home that night. The trial began for months later in the Fulton County Courthouse, a towering building of glass and steel that felt cold and impersonal. Aisha sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Vanessa had prepared her for the scrutiny, but nothing could dull the pain of reliving that night in front of a packed courtroom. The judge, a stern white woman named Margaret Ellison, presided with a no-nonsense demeanor. The jury was a mix 6 black for white to Hispanic, reflecting Atlanta's diversity, but also its deep divides. Hargrove's defense leaned hard on procedure. His lawyer, a slick man named Paul Whitaker, painted him as a dedicated officer doing his job in a high-crime area. He claimed Aisha's attitude escalated the situation, that she'd been non-compliant. The taillight, he admitted, was a misunderstanding. But he argued Hargrove had reasonable suspicion based on the context of the neighborhood. Vanessa dismantled that narrative with surgical precision. She played the body cam footage, pausing at key moments. Hargrove's smirk, his hand on his holster, the "you people" remark. She called witnesses, a mechanic who testified the taillight was functional, bystanders who corroborated Aisha's compliance, even Officer Keller, who admitted under oath that he'd told Hargrove to ease up. The courtroom was silent as the videos played, the tension so thick it felt like a physical weight. Aisha took the stand on day 3. She wore a navy blazer and a cream blouse, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Vanessa had coached her to stay calm, but as she recounted the night, Hargrove's tone, his grip on her arm, the way he'd made her feel less than human, her voice broke. "I wasn't a criminal," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was just trying to get home. I'm a nurse. I save lives. And he treated me like I was nothing." The jury watched, some leaning forward, others wiping their eyes. A black woman in the back row nodded slightly, her lips pressed tight. Hargrove, sitting at the defense table, stared at the floor, his face unreadable. The prosecution's cross-examination was brutal. Whitaker pressed Aisha on why she'd argued with Hargrove, why she hadn't just complied faster. Aisha's voice grew sharp. "I wasn't arguing. I was asking why I was being treated like a suspect for driving home. I have rights." The courtroom buzzed. Judge Ellison banged her gavel, calling for order. The trial lasted 6 days. On the final day, Vanessa's closing argument was a masterclass in controlled fury. She stood tall, her voice steady but laced with passion. "This case isn't just about Aisha Carter," she said, gesturing to her client. "It's about every black person who's been stopped, searched, humiliated, or worse, for no reason other than the color of their skin." Officer Hargrove didn't see a nurse that night. He saw a stereotype, and he acted on it. Whitaker's closing was predictable. Hargrove was a good cop, under pressure, making a split-second decision. But the jury wasn't buying it. After 4 hours of deliberation, they returned a verdict, not guilty on the charges against Aisha, and a civil suit against Hargrove and the Atlanta Police Department for racial profiling and excessive force. The courtroom erupted. Aisha's mother sobbed, clutching Jamal's hand. Aisha herself sat frozen, her hands trembling as Vanessa hugged her. "You did it," Vanessa whispered. "You fought, and you won." Outside, the steps of the courthouse were packed with supporters, their cheers drowning out the rain that had started again. Aisha stepped into the crowd, her face a mix of exhaustion and relief. Cameras flashed, but she didn't flinch. She'd survived Fulton Street, and she'd survived the system that tried to break her. Hargrove was suspended pending an internal review. The department issued a statement promising reforms, but Aisha knew better than to hold her breath. She went back to work at Grady, her scrubs a little more worn, her eyes a little harder. But every time she saved a life, every time she walked home without fear, she carried her victory with her. It wasn't just hers, it was for everyone who'd ever been pulled over, profiled, or silenced. The video ends with Aisha walking down Fulton Street at dusk, her nurse's bag slung over her shoulder. The camera lingers on her face, resilient, unbroken. A voiceover, calm but resolute, says, "Aisha Carter didn't just win a case. She reclaimed her dignity, and she reminded us all, justice starts when you refuse to stay silent."